Order, please. We'll begin the daily routine. Presenting and reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition, and the operative cause in this petition is we, the students, parents, staff, and community members, demand the immediate reinstatement of funds to complete the unfinished renovations of Riverview Rural High School. Mr. Speaker, I've attached my name in agreement, and there are over 3,300 names on this in less than 4 days. Thank you.
The petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be tabling le rapport d'étape 2007, progrès réalisé par les services en français offerts par le gouvernement de la Nouvelle-Écosse, or in English, the Progress Report 2007, French language services provided by the Government of Nova Scotia.
The report is tabled. Statements by ministers. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the leaders of the opposition for allowing me to make a quick statement. No prepared statement that I have forwarded, but they are aware of what I'm about to say. And that's simply, and we have already acknowledged them here this morning, but I want to take this opportunity to welcome back to the legislature after a short absence our friend and our colleague from the beautiful Colchester and Musquodoboit Valley. And welcome back to the chamber, a place that I know he dearly loves to be in, and he's served his constituents well, obviously, over the last number of years, since the early 1990s, and they have seen fit to put him back here time and time again. And I know that he wanted to be back here for the vote today. And from all my colleagues, from all our colleagues on this side of the House, we want to welcome you back and to wish you all the best as you continue to recover. Very much.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of our caucus, we'd just like to join with the Premier welcoming the Minister back to the House. I know that while he was absent that he was probably watching Ledge TV, keeping track, no doubt staying up at night reading Hansard, not wanting to miss any of the speeches that I've made over the last little while. On behalf of our caucus, we welcome him back to the House. Good to see you. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly on behalf of our caucus, we're certainly pleased to see the Minister of Agriculture back here in this House. Mr. Speaker, when I've had the opportunity to speak to students in high school and elementary school, I always try to tell them that, we're just as human as everyone else, and even though we're in elected office, we're no different than the average Nova Scotian, and we have our own failings, and we have the same challenges, especially to our health, that many Nova Scotians have. And I think this session has brought that to light for many of the members here in this chamber, that we do as well have to face some of the same realities with our health that many Nova Scotians do. And at the same time, it's a reminder for all of us of the need for us to continue healthy living. And I certainly agree with the Leader of the Opposition. I'm sure that the Minister of Agriculture was watching Ledge TV, and if I'm not mistaken, a few times I believe I could hear him heckling from home here in the chamber. And so I'm sure that before the day ends, he might even get a chance to remind us of some of that. But we're certainly pleased to see him back here, and certainly send our best wishes to him, and certainly to his entire family, which I'm sure has been extremely supportive of him during the past number of months. And we wish him well, and certainly look forward to seeing him and all of our colleagues back in the fall sitting of the legislature. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Well, you get in the front row, bro.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to, if I could, just take a moment to thank my colleagues in the Nova Scotia legislature. I have received a lot of support, and it means a lot to my family as well. Dealing with cancer is certainly a difficult issue, and I know we all know somebody that has been impacted by cancer. And I want to inform members of the House that yesterday I had my first meeting face-to-face, so to speak, with my specialist. He tells me, in fact, that the operation was a success. There will be a need later on in the summer, after there's more healing, to take some subsequent treatments, but everything's going good. But I certainly want to thank all Nova Scotians, because when you're in public life, everybody has Nova Scotians' best interests at heart. And the Premier and my colleagues, and especially the Acting Minister of Agriculture, has been so helpful to me during this difficult time. I want to certainly acknowledge that. But members on all sides of the House, you know, when you have health issues, little things really seem quite significant, and big things honestly seem insignificant. So I just wanted to point that out, that your support, everybody's support, the staff, everybody in one's life takes on a special meaning, and I've been so blessed. And thank you too, Speaker, for your kind words. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas each sitting, all members rely heavily on the staff that serve this legislature, and whereas from the staff of the Library and Committee's office to the Commissionaires and Sergeant-at-Arms, the house cleaning staff to the clerks in their office, Legislative Council's wise counsel, and legislative television staff who try daily to make us look and sound our best, along with the pages and the staff as directed by Mike and Peter, and of course the Speaker's office personnel. Whereas not only do many of these individuals faithfully serve the members of this House during the busy session days, but also assist our efforts year-round, keeping the work of this historic chamber moving forward, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House offer a hearty applause to all staff of this legislature and thank them for their service today and every day. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister, the Honourable the Premier.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the world's first female maritime patrol crew commander and the first female Aurora pilot instructor in the Canadian Forces has become a role model for many. Whereas Captain Mary Cameron Kelly of North Sydney has been flying with the Canadian military since the late 1980s and loves a variety of duties that the job requires, ranging from search and rescue missions to drug interdiction. And whereas Captain Cameron Kelly is a popular leader and is always quick to encourage young people who approach her with aspirations of following her example, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House send their sincere praise to North Sydney native Captain Mary Cameron Kelly of CFB Greenwood for her valued expertise and achievements that have opened doors for many Nova Scotians, particularly women. Mr. Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Patrick Joseph O'Brien retired this past week after 35 long years of service to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Whereas Patrick has served all over Canada from Toronto to Newfoundland, finally settling in the Halifax Regional Municipality. Whereas Patrick has risen through the ranks to achieve the rank of sergeant, earning the respect and friendship of his colleagues and those he has been charged to protect. Therefore be resolved, all members of this House join me in thanking Sergeant Patrick O'Brien for 35 years of service to the RCMP and congratulate him on his most recent retirement and wish him the best of luck in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jim MacDonald has effectively addressed disputes between construction, sector labour and management as a founding member and integral part of the construction industry panel for 36 years, since it was established in 1971. And whereas Mr. MacDonald has been building Nova Scotia for 65 years through construction projects big and small, and whereas Mr. MacDonald's pragmatic point of view, good humour and common sense are counted on among his industry and panel peers as a voice of reason, as solid and dependable as the foundation of a home. Therefore be resolved that all members of this House join the people of Nova Scotia in commending Jim MacDonald for his service to his industry, to his colleagues, and to the Labour Relations Board that serves the people of Nova Scotia. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable... Okay. The Honourable Premier on an introduction.
Mr. Speaker, if I might just take a moment. We have a couple of special guests, a few special guests with us here in the gallery today. One is Conrad Getson, who is the son of the member for Lunenburg West, who was a grade 6 student from Headville Academy, and his class is currently studying the procedures of the House. And I'm not sure, there he is up there. He's in the East Gallery, and I want to welcome Conrad here to the legislature and to see the work that his mother's doing and the important work that all members of the legislature are doing. Welcome.
The Honourable the Premier.
While I'm standing, I thank you for your patience. I have a couple of members of my constituency here today, that being Frankie and Mary McGuinness, who for many in this legislature would know the McGuinnesses, but also they're the parents of Donnie McGuinness, one of our pages here as well. So I'd like to welcome them here to Province House.
Introduction of bills. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 155 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act.
The Honourable Minister of Finance begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 155 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act.
Bill 198, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 155 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act.
Ordered that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Celebrate the 250th Anniversary of Democracy in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister of Finance begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Celebrate the 250th Anniversary of Democracy in Nova Scotia.
Bill 199, entitled An Act to Celebrate the 250th Anniversary of Democracy in Nova Scotia.
Ordered that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23, the Revised Statutes 1989, the Assessment Act.
The Honourable Member for Preston begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Assessment Act.
Bill 200, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Assessment Act.
Ordered that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. It's a busy chamber here today. Notices of motion. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I could have a few moments for another special event that's happening here
Please
today before we get into resolutions. Today is a special day for many things, and some of which we've already made public notice of earlier today. But today is a special day for our caucus. Our interim leader, Michel Samson, this will be his last day in the legislature if we finish today. let me hasten to say, as interim leader of the Liberal Party, and I just want to, in reflecting on what I was going to say here today, I could go on for a couple of hours on Michelle, but I won't do that. But I will say that as House Leader for a number of leaders in our party over the past few years, each one of them has brought something special to this place when they've been here, and I've had the honor to be the House Leader for every one of them since 1977, and there's been a few, but I've enjoyed dealing with them, and I've enjoyed dealing with them, and I've particularly enjoyed being the House Leader for Michelle and our caucus. And I just wanted to say that wherever the future takes Michelle, I'm sure the politics is going to play a major role down in the future for Michelle. And I want to, on behalf of our staff who are sitting in the gallery here today and who know Michelle, of course, very well, and our caucus and the entire Liberal Party and the people of Nova Scotia, I want to publicly thank Michelle for his great service as leader of the Liberal Party during his tenure, and wish him all the best in the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly on behalf of our caucus and the government side, I want to echo the comments of the House Leader for the Liberal Party. I have had the opportunity during the past number of months to get to know the interim leader better and better, and I'm quite pleased for that. Yeah, we've come closer and closer, I guess you could say. Well, Mr. Speaker, yes. Mr. Speaker, I have had the pleasure of serving the riding of Inverness, which, as we all know, is beside the leaders' riding as well. So we share many of the same friends and such in our own local area and the same issues. But I can tell you that I was very impressed in the last number of months of how the interim leader has served his caucus, how he's served our province, and how he's done it with dignity and respect. And for that, it will serve him well into the future. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'd like to join with the Premier and with your colleagues in your caucus, but also on behalf of our caucus, to thank you for the work that you've been doing on behalf of your party and on behalf of your caucus. I, too, have certainly noticed the growing fondness between yourself and the... In fact, I must admit it's been quite concerning to me. But look, everyone who comes to this House works hard, I believe, in their capacities, and I know how hard the leaders of the parties work, and it calls on you to do much more and to be away from your loved ones and to extend yourself much more. And we all appreciate that in public life. And thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly thank you to my good friend and colleague from Cape Breton South, and to the Premier and to the Leader of the Official Opposition for their comments. First, to my colleague from Cape Breton South, I didn't take that much offense to the hair comment, and I'm not coming back, so... And to get the Minister of Economic Development to apologize is reason for me to stay around here a little bit longer. So it just shows me that one can see new things every day here in the House of Assembly. So it's reason to stay. But Mr. Speaker, my brief time as a leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party has certainly given me an appreciation for the work, having served as an MLA for Richmond since March 24th, 1998, having celebrated along with a number of my colleagues our 9th anniversary just last month. It's given me an opportunity to better appreciate the job of leader of a party. And while in my case it's only been on an interim basis, it's certainly given me an appreciation for the work that's done by the Premier and by the leader of the official opposition, who is the longest serving leader of all three of us here in the House of Assembly. And as he has mentioned, it takes on a whole new dimension in the amount of time that's required. And certainly I've been blessed during my time here in the legislature to have served under leaders such as Russell McClellan, my good friend Wayne Godet, who still to this day is my longest serving leader in my 9 years as interim leader. But and he may just be my leader again someday. So I take every opportunity to say nice things about my colleague from Clare, but certainly, Mr. Speaker, Danny Graham, Francis McKenzie, all brought great determination and a great sense of dedication to our party during their time, and I certainly have a much better appreciation for the work that is done. Mr. Speaker, the success that we have as elected officials is certainly in no small part because of the people who work behind the scenes, which is our constituency staff back in our riding. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Dawn Boudreau, who's been working with me for a couple of years now, and for the extra work that she's had to do, not only fielding calls from the residents of Richmond County, but fielding calls from Nova Scotians around the province, which was a whole new responsibility. Joelle Bone, a good friend of mine, served as my executive assistant during my time and certainly helped deal with a number of the constituency matters and matters facing Nova Scotians, and I want to thank him for his time, and I know he's looking forward to my termination as interim leader of the party, so he certainly has seen some of the challenges that are faced and the added responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, our staff here in Halifax and here in our caucus office, Mr. Speaker, they are such a dedicated group of individuals, the people who work in all of our caucus offices, and they are the ones who do the research, they are ones who prepare us, they are ones who write the questions, and we're the ones who deliver them. And while Nova Scotians may be impressed by our performances, they should know that's in no small part because of the work that's done behind the scenes by the hard-working men and women in our caucus office who are dedicated to our democracy, dedicated to the people of Nova Scotia, and dedicated to a brighter future for our province. And I want to commend all of my caucus staff, our administration, our research, our communications, and certainly want to highlight my assistant, Marie Cox, who's been in our office for quite some time, for her work, and certainly to our Chief of Staff, Nancy Shepherd, who has done a tremendous job for us this session and certainly during my entire time as interim leader. But Mr. Speaker, let me as well thank my family. As the leader of the opposition mentioned, the added responsibilities have caused me to be away from my family even more than our regular job as an MLA does, and certainly to my wife Claudine, to my parents and my entire family, to my riding association for their support. I want to thank them all, and I want to as well recognize the Premier, who I've had the opportunity, as you mentioned, to work much closer with, and to the government House Leader especially, who I've worked much closer with as well, and certainly the respect that I've always had a great respect for the government House Leader. We've certainly had our battles on this floor, but we've attended a number of conferences together and got to know each other and our families that much closer, and I've enjoyed that time, and I do recognize the comments made by the Leader of the official opposition, and I have to tell you, you put up a good fight trying to push you out of the way from working with the Premier and with the government, so that it wasn't an easy struggle, but I thank you for recognizing our efforts in that regard. Mr. Speaker, the decision not to run for leadership for our party was a difficult one for me personally, for my family. It's one that I do not regret, especially when I see the quality candidates that we have, Mike Smith, Kenzie McKinnon, and certainly I want to personally commend and wish best wishes to my colleagues from Halifax, Clayton Park, and from Annapolis. Our party will be well served. I look forward to continuing here in this House. And let me just say, Mr. Speaker, while some have suggested my decision not to run for leader was an indication that I was going to step out of politics, let me, for the record, state that I have every intention of seeking the Liberal nomination in Richmond once again and being able to continue the privilege of serving the people of Richmond County, which they have given me on 4 occasions for 9 years. And I can tell you, working with the Premier, people of the Strait area had great expectations during the last election of us being able to have great success for the Strait area. Mr. Speaker, I believe all of our work here in this House has not only had the success for the Strait area, it's had success for the people of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Notices of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the members of this House have called on the federal government to recommit to the true intent of the Atlantic Accord, to stand alone as an economic tool to support Nova Scotia's goal of self-sufficiency, and remove what is in fact a discriminatory budgetary hammer on the people of Nova Scotia. And whereas the House has unanimously affirmed Nova Scotia's determination to accept no less than the Offshore Revenues Accord as negotiated and guaranteed, that Nova Scotia will receive 100% of offshore revenues, separate and apart from the normal equalization formula as it exists from time to time. Therefore, be it resolved that this House today affirm that our goal is to ensure physical and economic fairness for Nova Scotia as the true intent of the Atlantic Accord, a standalone economic tool separate and apart from the equalization formula as it evolves over time, and further affirm the willingness of all parties in this House to keep working until the federal government recommits to this goal. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas family, friends, and colleagues will gather on Saturday, May 12, 2007 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Sister Bernadette Murphy as a member of the Sisters of Charity, and where Sister Bernadette has focused her efforts over the years by supporting the work of the Sisters of Charity within the order at Mount St. Vincent Mother House, and whereas she has served as a supervisor of both the cafeteria and dining room and continues to play an active role at the Mother House even in her retirement. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House extend congratulations to Sister Bernadette Murphy on her 50th anniversary as a member of the Sisters of Charity and wish her well into the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dr. Arthur Hines Elementary School Principal Hazel Dill was honored earlier this year as the Nova Scotia Division winner of Canada's Most Outstanding Principals Award, an award for exceptional contributions to education. And whereas Hazel has been principal at Dr. Arthur Hines in Somerville, Hants County, for the past 12 years, having been born and raised in nearby Walton, Hants County. And whereas Hazel is a modest fashion emphasized in a recent newspaper story that the national award wasn't about her, but about the school and the community which have worked together to improve education. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend our congratulations to Dr. Arthur Hines Elementary School Principal Hazel Dill for this outstanding achievement and for contributing to the grassroots education of her students while recognizing the impact she will have on their future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Veterans Independent Program provides services to thousands of Canadian veterans and their widows, many who live here in Nova Scotia, and whereas in 2005, Prime Minister Harper Then the Leader of the Opposition promised that a Conservative government would immediately extend the VIP program to all widows of our veterans. And whereas after 15 months have gone by and there's still no action by Prime Minister Harper and the Conservative government on extending this program, therefore be it resolved that the Premier and his government encourage the Prime Minister Harper and their federal Conservative cousins to honour their commitment and expand the services of the Veterans Independent Program to all widows of our veterans. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Inspector Miles Burke, a 27-year veteran of the Cape Breton Regional Police Force, will be singled out for his exceptional contributions to policing and community development, and whereas Inspector Burke attended a 15-day FBI Executive Development Seminar at his prestigious training academy in Quantico, Virginia, to further hone his management skills and build relationships with high-ranking police officials in the United States, Great Britain, and Australia, and whereas Inspector Burke will be awarded the Order of Merit of the Police Forces by Governor General Michael Jean in Ottawa, which honours a career of exceptional service and distinctive merit displayed by officers in the Canadian Police Services. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate Inspector Miles Burke on this outstanding achievement and his exceptional work for his profession, and take comfort in knowing his expertise and training will benefit the citizens of Cape Breton for years to come. I would ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I mentioned in my remarks regarding our hardworking caucus staff that we have for the Liberal caucus, I would like to take this time to acknowledge here present in the House in our West Gallery some of the staff that we have here and ask them to rise after I named them for to be recognized by the House. We have Pearline Wright, Sean Surrett, Shirley Ann Williams, Marie Cox, Trish Townsend, Cheryl McCachran, Ryan Grant, Ryan Francis, Michelle Coffin, Joelle Bone, Charlene Baker, Nancy Shepherd, Jennifer Forster, and Sean Lawler. And Mr. Speaker, these are the hard-working men and women that we have working in our caucus office, and I just want to recognize them and thank them.
Indeed, welcome to our special guests here. This is not the time to call the 1-800 number for the Liberal caucus. The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bridgewater Minor Hockey Association was home to the first annual Lee Wynot Memorial Tournament, and whereas teams came from throughout the province to compete in this 5-day competition, and whereas the Bridgewater Hawks Pee Wee B hockey team captured the tournament title after defeating Clare in the championship game.
Clare?
Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate team players Garrett Fancy, Avery Demone, William Richards, Cal DeWolf, Cale Potter, Ben Eisner, Nolan Razzle, Jacob Fever, Conrad Getson, Dustin LeBlanc, Richard Wiggle, Rylan Acker, Reed McQueen, Ben Finney, Ryan Cook, Cole West, Sean Feener, and Matt Baker, and the coaching staff Jeff DeWolf, Ryan Wilkie, Tony Cook, and Peter Langell on winning the gold medal game. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. Now a member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this week Nova Scotia honoured its most dedicated volunteers at the annual Provincial Volunteer Banquet. Whereas Pictou County resident Emma Campbell was selected as New Glasgow's Volunteer of the Year for the many years she has given of her time. And whereas she has volunteered for 17 years for the local chapter of the Kidney Foundation, sings in the church choir, and works hard for Meals on Wheels, distributing church bulletins to seniors confined to their homes. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send their congratulations and best wishes to New Glasgow Volunteer of the Year, Emma Campbell, for her numerous years of volunteer work in Pictou County. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll be presenting this on behalf of the honourable member for Cape Breton North. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Kiwanis Cayley Golden K Club of Sydney Mines in North Sydney has been serving the community for 20 years, providing support to breakfast programs, mental health programs, the Children's Aid Society, the Cape Breton Firefighters Burn Camp, and the Northside Hospital Foundation. And whereas on May 9th, the Kiwanis Cayley Golden K Club will be delivering their 100,000th meal under the Meals on Wheels program on the North Side that started in the fall of 1989. And whereas it is estimated that 250,000 miles have been driven to deliver the meals to citizens who require them, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in recognizing the Kiwanis Cayley Golden K Club for this worthwhile program and congratulate them on achieving a significant milestone in their 20 years of service. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Patricia Sykes, a resident of Glace Bay, walked into the Glace Bay Food Bank to ask for help by way of a grocery order in order to feed her family. And whereas Patricia Sykes first met Sandra McPherson, coordinator of the Glace Bay Food Bank, and obtained the much-needed assistance for her family. And then Ms. Sykes offered to volunteer her time to the food bank. And whereas 10 years later, no longer a client, but still a volunteer with her family full-grown, Ms. Sykes continues to volunteer her time at the Glace Bay Food Bank and is usually found in the kitchen whipping something up for lunch Monday through Friday. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly commend Patricia Sykes for her continued volunteer work, support, and dedication to the Glace Bay Food Bank. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister for Acadian Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Monsieur le Président, je procéderai en date future l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que les élèves du cours d'art dramatique de la 10e année de l'école Parent-Bas et que l'enseignant Yvette D'Entremont a été invité à participer au Festival Théâtre Action de Sudbury à la fin du mois pour donner une représentation modifiée à de récents spectacles intitulés Jean et Juan. Attendu que le Festival Theatre Action ou Théâtre Action permette à plus de 400 élèves de l'Ontario à se rassembler, attendu que, à l'occasion de son 10e anniversaire, le Festival Théâtre Action a seulement invité 2 classes d'art dramatique venant de l'extérieur de l'Ontario. Par conséquent, qu'il soit résolu que tous les membres de cette Assemblée se joignent à moi pour féliciter la classe d'art dramatique de l'école Parent-Bas et leurs enseignants pour l'honneur qui leur est fait, ainsi pour leur souhaiter un bon festival. Monsieur le Président, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans débat. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the following resolution, whereas the grade 10 drama class at École Parent-Bas and their teacher Yvette D'Entremont have been invited to participate in the Festival Théâtre Action in Sudbury at the end of the month in performing a modified version of their recent production, Jean et Juan. And whereas the festival brings together over 400 students from schools throughout Ontario, and whereas as a part of its 10th anniversary, the festival is inviting only 2 theatre groups from outside Ontario to participate. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating the theatre group at École Parent-Bas and their teacher for this recognition of their outstanding work and wishing them well in the festival. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and patch without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax-Chebucto on an introduction.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I would like to draw to the attention of the members of this Assembly visitors in the West Gallery. We have with us today from the Halifax Independent Middle School, located in my constituency, 18 students from grades 6 and 7, accompanied by their teacher, Kate Allen, and by one of the parents, Rusty Neal. They've come today to observe us, to tour our facilities, and to watch us at work. I've already had the chance to speak with them, and I wonder if they would rise and if the members of the House would accord them a warm welcome.
Indeed, we want to welcome our special guest to the Province House today, the Honourable Member for Digby, Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for the past month, many long days have been spent in this House of Assembly on behalf of the people of Nova Scotia, and whereas many of the MLAs have been seen doing the work on behalf of Nova Scotians, but many others have not. Whereas these others include all the House of Assembly employees, the MLA employees and caucus staff, ministerial staff members, and the media who keep Nova Scotians informed. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly applaud and thank the unnoticed work of all the good people mentioned above. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Military Family Resource Centre in Greenwood is a wealth of support for family members of our men and women in the armed services, and whereas whether it is a need to talk to someone who truly understands or someone looking for guidance on anything from childcare to education, there is someone at the Military Family Resource Centre who is able to help. And whereas we have put increasing demands on our military personnel over the past decade, increasing the stress on families during deployment, the Military Family Resource Centre is there to assist. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House recognize the contribution the Military Family Resource Centres across Nova Scotia make to the armed forces community, and with them wish them continued success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas small businesses throughout rural Nova Scotia play a major and unique role in the contribution of our local economy, and whereas many small businesses along the Eastern Shore are the mainstream of employment for local residents, and whereas these companies have a reputation of offering quality goods and services to our local residents and visitors to the Eastern Shore. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House applaud the contributions of small business operators who are making a positive contribution to the development of the Eastern Shore and wish them continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to draw people's attention to the West Gallery. I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Brown and Carolyn Earle, who are here representing the Face of Poverty Coalition, which is an ecumenical coalition working to reduce poverty in Nova Scotia. So I ask everyone to give them a warm welcome. Perhaps they could stand.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers are the heart of our community, and whereas Elizabeth Henry of Loosedale gives of her time to serve on the Strait Richmond Community Health Board, member of the palliative care team of Strait Richmond Hospital, and serves on the advisory committee for Réseau Santé Nouvelle-Écosse. And whereas Elizabeth Henry was selected as the Richmond County Volunteer of the Year and recognized at the provincial awards ceremony on Tuesday, April 10, 2007. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Elizabeth Henry for all of her volunteer work and wish her well into the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas David Wilson of Truro, owner of Ski Wentworth, was recently recognized by skiers and residents of Wentworth Valley for his and his family's support for skiing and commitment to Wentworth Valley. And whereas the Wilson family first became involved in the creation and operation of what is now Ski Wentworth in 1946, with Dave's father, George, providing financial support to entrepreneur Stan LeBlanc to develop a ski resort in Wentworth Valley. whereas George Wilson and later his sons David and Peter continued their financial and volunteer support to Ski Wentworth over the years, including the installation of the first ski tow in Atlantic Canada in 1956, the purchase of land and timber rights for the hill in 1957, the construction of the ski lodge of a ski lodge in 1961, prior to Dave and Peter purchasing Ski Wentworth in the 1980s. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend congratulations and thanks to Dave Wilson and the Wilson family in being recognized for their 60-plus years of family involvement in Ski Wentworth and a lifetime of support for skiing in Nova Scotia and Wentworth Valley. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mr. Garth Cockin is preparing to celebrate a significant milestone in his life in May when he turns 100 years old, and is one of 69 volunteers from across Nova Scotia who were recognized Tuesday at Nova Scotia's 33rd Annual Provincial Volunteer Awards ceremony. And whereas Mr. Cockin, whose name was put forward by the town of Kentville, is the only surviving founding committee member of the Annapolis Valley Apple Blossom Festival, founded in 1933, and served as mayor of Kentville from 1960 to 1963. And whereas Mr. Cockin's volunteer spirit was felt by all for decades in Kentville, having served as president of the Kentville Youth Association, chair of the Annapolis Valley Industrial Park, with the Kentville Fire Department, president of the Kentville Board of Trade, chair of the Kentville Planning Advisory Committee, chair of the Kentville Rotary Club and the Community Swimming Pool Project, and as an aside, chair of my fundraising campaign in '99. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend our sincere thanks to soon-to-be Centurion Mr. Garth Cockin of Kentville for his well-deserved recognition at the 2007 33rd Annual Nova Scotia Volunteer Award ceremony and dinner. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor, please say aye. Contrary, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Helen Levy, secretary at New Midas Elementary School, has worked there for over 30 years, and whereas Helen Levy is able to call most parents without the use of the phone book and knows where 90% of the children actually live and still recognizes my voice when I call the New Midas Elementary School there today, having had 4 children go through the school. And whereas Helen Levy has played the part of nurse, babysitter, mother, grandmother, and friend to all over and above her regular duties, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the exceptional role Helen Levy has played for all the many children that have passed through the doors of New Midas Elementary School and the comfort she brings to the families and staff with her mere presence as guardian to all. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lunenburg Curling Club has produced many championship curlers over the years, and whereas the Lunenburg team of Lauren Strickland, Kelly Levy, Heidi Collicutt, Jessica Eisner, and coach Don McIntosh are continuing the rink's successful tradition, having won the 2007 Nova Scotia Under Women's Curling Championship in February. And whereas the Strickland team will represent Nova Scotia at the Canadian Curling Championships in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Therefore, it be resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Lauren Strickland, Kelly Levy, Heidi Collicutt, Jessica Eisenhower, and Don McIntosh on winning the Nova Scotia Under-18 Women's Curling Championship and on representing our province at the national level. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call the order of business public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to need the 2 bills this
From
morning.
the clerks. One 198
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have the unanimous consent of the House with respect to Bill number 198, an act to amend Chapter 155 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act. I'd like to have a unanimous consent of the House to deem the bill to be printed and on the order paper for consideration for second reading.
There's a request for consent. Is it agreed?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would move second reading of Bill 198, and I would ask that the unanimous consent of the House, in the event that the bill receives second reading, to waive law amendments.
Request for consent. Is it agreed? The motion is for second reading of Bill 198. House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary by nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, again with respect to Bill number 199, an act to celebrate the 250th anniversary of democracy in Nova Scotia, I would ask the unanimous consent of the House to deem the bill to be on the order paper and to be printed so that it may be given second reading today.
Request for consent is agreed. Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would move second reading of Bill 199, and in the event that the bill receives second reading, I would ask the unanimous consent of the House that there be a waiver of law amendments committee.
There's a request for consent. Is it agreed? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would now ask that the House resolve itself.
No, order. Just have to do the motion. The motion is for second reading.
Oh, sorry.
Did you move it?
I did move second reading.
Oh, you did. Sorry, my apologies. The motion is for second reading of Bill 199. House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Contrary by nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask for the unanimous consent of the House to waive a Committee of the Whole House on bills with respect to Bill 198 and 199.
There's a request for consent. Is agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move Bill. I would also ask that Bill 198 receive third reading at this time.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 198. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary by nay. Motion is carried.
98, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 155 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Executive Council Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move third reading of Bill 199.
Motion is for third reading of Bill 199. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary by nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 199, entitled An Act to Celebrate the 250th Anniversary of Democracy in Nova Scotia.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I might be pushing my luck to do the same thing with the Appropriations Act, but I know I can find some support here, but elsewhere is my concern. Under the circumstances, therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would move that the House now resolve itself, that you leave the chair and that the House resolve itself to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
Motion is carried. The House shall now resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House on Supply unto Her Majesty.
Good morning. The Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The committee has 26 minutes left. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue along my line of questioning that I had last evening regarding gas regulation in this province. And just as a starter on this, we've heard rumors of cars being lined up in New Brunswick buying gas from Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia cars line up at New Brunswick gas stations trying to buy gasoline, and one would ask why. And I can tell you why, because as the regulation came in place in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, if you look at the different gas prices between Halifax and Moncton, similar sized cities, you will soon realize why the cars have been lined up just across the border in New Brunswick from Nova Scotia. You know, it started off in July 1st, 2006 at a 0.3 cent per litre difference. Of course, Nova Scotia was paying even more then. The average family in Nova Scotia, that didn't mean a whole lot. Then in August 24th of 2006, price was just about equal, but it crept up a little bit higher in Nova Scotia at 0.4 cents per litre. And that again wasn't too bad. But in October, the trend started to change. If you look at October 5th, 2006, the price went to 2.2 cents difference. That's higher in Nova Scotia than in New Brunswick. Now that didn't mean a lot, but if you bought 1,000 litres of fuel, that was $22. Now $22 to a lot of people isn't a lot of money, but to some people it is a tremendous amount of money. It means that they'll probably have to drive a lot less for whatever period of time it takes them to consume 1,000 litres of fuel, which is not a lot of fuel. Then the situation got a lot worse. February the 16th, 2006, the price of gas in Nova Scotia was 94.9, and in New Brunswick it was 90.7, a 4.2 cent differential. At that point, we were paying $42 per 1,000 litres more for fuel, all under regulation in both provinces. Then in December the 29th, 2006, you can see a trend happening here. The price went up, the differential went up to 6.4 cents per litre. Now, and again, that's $64 per 1,000 litres, and if anyone lives in a rural area and has to travel very far, you're soon consuming 1,000 litres of fuel. So that's another $64 out of your budget. Out of a senior's budget, that's a lot of money if they consume that much fuel in a month or 2 months, or someone on a fixed income or low income. And then lo and behold, we hit February the 23rd, 2007. And the price went to 11.4 cent difference in price between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. 11.4 cents. That's $114 per 1,000 litres of fuel. $114. Now that's a significant amount of money to anybody at any income range. And if you look at a business that maybe buys 4,000 or 5,000 litres of fuel a month, it's a huge hit to their bottom line. And when you get that kind of a hit to the bottom line, that's going to eventually hurt our status in the province, our competitiveness with other provinces and other areas. And ultimately, business owners are going to have to make a very difficult decision whether to reduce staff, put prices up. And if they put prices up, of course, if it costs them $1 more, they have to put the price up $3 to regain the situation they had and to ensure that the company is profitable. So when you look through that process, it's very expensive. So that's $1, that's $114 per 1,000 litres. So then it gets worse. On March the 9th, 2007, we've got $117 per 1,000 litres, or a differential of 11.7 cents per litre. Again, that puts the price up even more, another $3 per 1,000 litres. And you know, an average family would probably burn 3,000 or 4,000 litres a year, so it's a significant amount of money. And it really is significant. And you look at the cost and how it affects our economy long term, is very, very negative impact on the economy. At the same time, this is just with our neighbours in New Brunswick. I'm just talking New Brunswick here. I'm not talking New England, which is the spread is huge difference, a huge difference. In New England, I think our price is around $5 a gallon, and in New England it's around between 2 and 3 something a gallon. So, you know, that's a huge difference. And if we start going to the U.S. and competing in the U.S., it makes it very difficult for Nova Scotia companies to do that. Well, on April 6th, we got a little bit of a break of this year, and we went down to 9.9 cents. That's still $100 basically per 1,000 litres. So you can see where this is going. That's why the cars are lined up in New Brunswick to buy gas. And it shows that our regulated system doesn't appear to be working. I know the NDP, the leader for the NDP stated in several occasions in the paper and the media that regulation was great for rural Nova Scotia, great for price stability, and great for business in Nova Scotia. Well, it might be great for some of the small gas stations, but in the meantime, if we put other businesses out of business, or if we make them suffer and the people in the province suffer because of higher prices in other areas because fuel costs have gone up, we're not gaining. We're actually going backwards. And it's a very negative situation that's being created here. Now, if the price of gas was comparable within half a cent a litre between provinces, and I understand it's always higher in Canada than the U.S. with exchanges and all the other things, but not the huge differential it is today. You can compete, you can live with that, you can work with that. So, you know, when you look at gas prices, it's a very, very serious situation. And as time goes on, and we see more and more of this, and trouble with the business is, and trouble with the family is, it takes a long time for these increases to catch up. So you're used to living on a certain income, so something goes up maybe $20 or $30 a month. You don't really notice it for the first 3 or 4 months or the first 6 months, but a year later, a year and a half later, 2 years later, it finally catches up. And when it does catch up, it can have a devastating effect, a serious devastating effect. You can find that, well, maybe I can't make that payment that I was making on my mortgage of my home because now I just don't have enough cash to do it. And then your department gets hit with people that have to go under debtor's protection, which we should not have to do. You know, this is extreme examples I'm using, but these are real examples, real examples. I often talk to seniors in my area and people in low income and fixed income that have a great deal of difficulty paying their property taxes, which are really, I feel, in the HRM way too high. Nothing we can do about that here. But when they add in the extra cost of fuel, we add in all the other incidental costs that go up $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month. All of a sudden, they're in an impossible situation, absolutely impossible situation. And if this doesn't stop, if it doesn't slow a bit, or if we don't come up with some other way to help people in these situations, you're going to see them lose their homes. I've seen that happen in my area, unfortunately, where their homes have been sold for property taxes. They've had to sell their homes in some cases where they just simply couldn't keep up with the mortgages and are fortunate enough to sell it before the bank forecloses. Are very lucky. And this is just not in my area. I know this is happening in all different areas of the province. And if you live in a rural area, the gas differential is even worse because typically you've got to travel further, even to pick up your groceries, to go to the doctor, do the essential things that you have to do. And those things you can't stop doing. You still have to do those things. And all of a sudden, you know, that small little increase or difference in the price of gas is serious. And it's very, very serious for people in this province. And as we go forward with that and we see how it affects everything, it's very negative. I'm going to talk also about this HST refund on fuel, which is tied in with the gasoline prices, really. Simply put, the old program that was in place that helped really people with low income, it actually allowed them to buy some oil. You got a check, they could take that check and purchase oil. The new system, although it gives everybody a tax break, the people that burn the most fuel get the biggest credit. Well, think about that. Who burns the most fuel? Probably the person with the worst insulated house or the biggest house. Or, you know, when you look at that, and typically who has the biggest house? People that have the biggest income. So the people that can afford to make changes in their home to reduce the cost of fuel, probably a lot more than you would save on the HST. And then the people, again, with the low income and with fixed income are not benefiting from this program. They're simply not benefiting. The money they got before, they could actually take that check and buy fuel. That made a difference. It really made a difference. I said yesterday, the minister, and rightfully so, said that there wasn't a lot of take-up on this system. But it takes a while for people to get used to this and understand what it's about. And with people with low income, it made a huge difference, a huge difference.
And if you see that how it rolls out, and it all fits together. So you get higher gasoline prices. So that has a negative impact on the cash flow in your family, in your home, and in your business. And businesses employ people. And I can tell you, I ran a business for a long time, and everything goes to the bottom line. And you've got to do something to ensure that bottom line is solid. And if it isn't solid, you're not in business long. And if it isn't solid, you soon have to lay off people, make changes, reduce the business that you do, and all of a sudden you can't compete. And when you can't compete, if you put your prices too high, then you're out of business, and then what happens to all the people that work for you? That's a serious problem. So when you tie all these things together, we're headed down a very negative road, a road that we can't be on. Unfortunately, we're there, and we're moving on that road, and this has got to be corrected. I can't see under regulation. It's been proven before with lots of studies that regulation typically, on the average, costs more for the consumer than non-regulation. I also want to talk about the little surcharge that was put on the gasoline in Nova Scotia to pay for the administration of the regulation, another tax to the already beleaguered taxpayer in this province. And that collects quite a bit of money every year to do this regulation, money that could go off of the price of gasoline, although it's not a lot. It all adds up. Every point of a penny makes a difference. It does make a difference to people long term. It all accumulates, and people don't understand that. And once it accumulates and they see it accumulating and see what happens, they're pretty soon wonder why they're in the financial situation they're in, and they can't get out of it. So when you look at those things, you see what's happening. And then I want to commend the government for on the cap issue with assessments, because this is all tied in as well. Because before, with the 15, and 10% cap on assessments and 10%, however you wanted to put it, basically your assessment would double, almost triple over less than a 10-year period, regardless, providing your assessment went up if you had the cap on. This new consumer price index will at least give some people some stability as long as they apply, and I encourage everyone to apply for that assessment cap. Will give them some stability. But even if you have a 2% increase in your tax rate here in HRM, which I'm most familiar with, it's still a substantial increase in your taxes. I mean, if you're paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year in property taxes, which is real, is very real here in this municipality, all of a sudden, you know, you get a 2% increase, you get a reasonably good size increase. And when that accumulates over time. Now, as all these costs go up, and again, I get back to the family that's on a fixed income, as the cost goes up, so your taxes go up, your property taxes go up, all these things are driven by government one way or another. The gasoline price is higher here than in New Brunswick. And if you look at the HST refund, it's really helping the people the most to burn the most fuel, the people with the biggest homes. It's not really helping the people that are in the low-income areas or fixed income or fixed or on a pension. And I would bet that that over the time that the people on the lower income hadn't really realized very much of a tax break with the 1% off the HST. Really insignificant as compared to the $200 and some a program that I feel was a very good program the government had put forward before to help people to contend with the actual high cost of heating their homes. You know, if you're faced with a choice of buying a prescription, heating your home, or paying your taxes, or going to a doctor's appointment because the fuel cost is too high, which you're going to pick? If you could pick two of those 5 things, what are you going to pick? It depends on the day. Depends how sick you feel, depends how cold you are, depends how hungry you are. You make that choice that day, that may affect everything you do that month, all that month. So you may be cold all that month. You may not be able to eat every day. And I know this is happening because we have food banks in our area, that hardworking volunteers, and we're getting more and more and more people coming to these food banks as all these negative impacts are hitting them. And you know, the minister got up yesterday and the stats, I quoted some stats through the employment records, that actually the number of people actually working in Nova Scotia, the number has gone down. And I can get those numbers for the minister at some time. We have a lower unemployment rate because the employment rate is only calculated on the number of people looking for work. That doesn't count the people that have given up looking for work. It doesn't count the people that have retired and no longer want to work, just the people that are looking for work. So when you look at the statistics, they look good on the surface, but they're not good. So and the population in the province is shrinking slightly. The number of jobs is shrinking. We get fewer qualified people here to do the jobs. And, you know, this is not positive for our province. And as we move this forward, and we see the results of these, the results of these things may not be evident to everybody in the province for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it's coming. It is coming, and we're going to feel the bite when it does come. And we get a higher debt than we've ever had in this province, and anyone on the other side wants to have a discussion about the debt in this province with me, I would love to have it on this floor. Because I was here in 1993 when the province was basically bankrupt, with a huge debt and unaccounted for debt in places like the Workers' Compensation Board that weren't even on the books. So when they get up and they talk about the debt that was generated after that, well, I've got the numbers, I know exactly what the numbers are, and I know the whole history from day one. And it was burned in my memory as we struggled to bring this horrendous situation under control that we inherited from the Buchanan government. You know, as we look at all these things, hopefully we're not going down the same road. And I realize the present government has had better financial control than the Buchanan government did, and I appreciate that. They did, however, change the bookkeeping system in the province to balance the books, and when I did ask the auditor in public accounts on the record if the books would have been balanced if we used the old bookkeeping system, he thought for a moment, and he said, no, they wouldn't have been. But last year, which was a year ago, they probably were. That afternoon, I got an email from him and said I was mistaken. There hasn't been a time since this new bookkeeping system put in place that the books have actually been balanced in this province of Nova Scotia compared to the old bookkeeping system that was in place prior to that. That's a horrible thing to realize. So just by changing your bookkeeping system, you balance the books every year. So that's a play with numbers, and that's not appropriate. So we've added to the debt, and it continues. But the higher our taxes get, the higher the user fee gets, the higher our differential in gas pricing is, the poorer break we have on fuel for home heating, the worse the situation will get. And it'll creep up on everybody. And I remember years ago we talked about taxing and the effects of taxing. You can only go so far with taxing. Once you tax people beyond a certain point, it goes to a negative. So you actually get less tax in because people find ways to get around the tax. They stop buying things, they stop building things, and they stop doing things because they can no longer afford to do these. And I'm not talking about people in our province that are on fixed income will suffer the most from all these things, but also people that run businesses and do things in the province that finally just give up. And we see a huge exodus from young people, and not only young people, but a lot of people to Alberta to work, higher paid jobs, lower taxes, and the scenario goes on. A trend we have to stop. And I've not seen anything from this government to indicate that that's happening. You know, and this gas price and this regulation on gas is one of those things. It's one of the things that hasn't helped us, won't help us under the present circumstances, and it's actually adding a little bit of money, a cost to the fuel cost in this province. And as we move this forward, and over time, and again I'm going to stress, you know, March the 9th, 2007, $117 per 1,000 liters of fuel. Now think about that. Think about that. Now $117, even in today's dollar, is a lot of money. If you clear on a pension, $1,000 a month. and you burn, say, $1,000 a month, 1,000 liters a month on fuel. Now, hopefully someone on a fixed income wouldn't have to travel that much, but if they were sick, had to travel back and forth to the hospital every day, and pay for the parking there as well, you're soon going to chew up this extra $117. It's $117 they simply don't have. So if you look at it from that standpoint, this is a very, very negative situation. And it doesn't need to be. It needs to have some real aggressive moves from the province to ensure that we're competitive with people like New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, our nearest neighbors, so Nova Scotia companies can go there and service them and bring some outside money into the province. Now, what's outside money mean to the province? If you have a company that exports, at one time I think it was 7 to 1 the dollar was worth. And if you sold a product outside of Nova Scotia, and more so outside the country, for every dollar that you sold had an economic impact in this province of $7. Every dollar, 7 to 1. So, but if our companies can't compete and they can't sell our products outside the province because their costs are too high, and we've already seen that with the Trenton Car Works with all kinds of problems they've had, shutting those jobs down, that's income we're not going to have in this province. Now, now it doesn't only affect Trenton, which is hit directly immediately, but it hits all Nova Scotia. Because those people that were making good money in Trenton were also buying homes, buying vehicles, services that they'll no longer be able to afford to buy. And the people that were supplying those services are going to be hurt. So as you see these things close and you see businesses become less and less competitive, it has a devastating effect long term. It's like the tax changes that were just announced in HRM. They received a 10% increase in assessment, and that was an average one. Some people went up probably as much as 100% or more in assessment. You've seen in some areas the addition of supplementary funding, which should not be in place. It should be funded properly by the provincial government for education, put in place. So what happens? Think about this. You get your assessment notice, and you have no idea what your assessment was the previous year, so you assume it hasn't changed much unless you keep track of that very well. A lot of people are too busy or just don't understand how the system works. So that comes in, you say, oh, that's not too bad. So you get your first interim tax bill. That's not too bad. That's half of last year's. My taxes must be going to be exactly the same as it was last year. And then whack, in the fall you get your final tax bill. That shows all your assessment increases, any increase that the municipality, wherever the municipality is going to be, has put on. And instead of maybe having a second bill of $500, which would have been double what your first tax one was, it may be $1,000. So all of a sudden you've got to come up with more money that you didn't realize that you had to do. So these things have got to change. They have to change. We have to let people know what their assessments were in the past. We have to try to encourage people to fill out the CAP forms, which I think personally should have been automatic, and then people would have had to, with heavy fines for someone that didn't live in the province, or other penalties that we could put someone in the province if they misled or falsified documentation that indicated that they indeed didn't live in the province and was a home they had from outside the province. So when you look at all these things, I feel that this government hasn't done the things that they need to do to really stimulate the economy. And I think it's a shame. It's a shame for all of us as Nova Scotians. And we're all going to lose long term. And it's time that these things are changed. And it doesn't take much of a change to help a family. When you help a family, it helps our province. It helps us all. It doesn't take much of a change to help a small business and not give them grants, but make them competitive so they can actually do the things they need to do to employ Nova Scotians and work with Nova Scotians to ensure that they build a strong economy and help all of us.
Order, please.
Thank you.
The time allotted for debate in Committee on Supply has now expired. I would like to recognize the Chair on the Subcommittee on Supply to report on the deliberations of the subcommittee. The Honourable, the member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the Subcommittee on Supply has met and completed its maximum of 40 hours allowed for consideration of the estimates by the Subcommittee on Supply.
The report is tabled. As 40 hours have expired, the rule required that the question be now put. Shall all remaining resolutions carry? Carry. It is agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but yesterday during supply I was asked for some information by the Honourable Member from Preston, which I want to table.
That is in order. We'll accept that. The information is tabled. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Order, please. Order, please. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole on Supply reports.
That the committee has met and finalized its deliberations on the resolutions as referred to it. And the chairman's been instructed to recommend
the 45 resolutions as referred to the committee to the House with approval.
The motion is that the House concurs in the report of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply. Will all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call the order of business introduction of bills.
Introduction of bills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses of the Public Service of the Province. Mr. Speaker, the bill is printed, and I ask the page to distribute a copy to each member.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Finance begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying of Certain Charges and Expenses of the Public Service of the Province.
1, entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses of the Public Service of the Province.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of the Bill 201, the Appropriations Act 2007.
The Honourable Minister of Finance moves second reading of Bill 201, the Appropriations Act 2007. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 201, entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses of Public Service of the Province.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would now move third reading of Bill 201, the Appropriations Act 2007.
The Honourable Minister of Finance moves third reading of Bill 201, the Appropriations Act 2007. Would all those in favour of the motion please recorded vote?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
Ring the bells, please. The whip satisfied? Whip satisfied? Is the whip satisfied? Recorded vote has been called for on third reading of Bill 201, the Appropriations Act 2007. The clerk shall call the roll.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Oui.
Ms. Bolivar-Getson.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Dukes.
Yes.
Ms. Casey.
Yes.
Ms. Stretch.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Mr. Goucher.
Yes.
Mr. McLeod.
Yes.
Mr. Porter.
Yes.
Mr. Bain.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Ms. Massey. Ms. Massey.
Yes.
Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell.
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Maureen McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Dexter.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson.
Oui.
Ms. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Mr. Colwell.
Yes.
Mr. H. David Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Gadet.
Oui.
Mr. David A. Wilson.
Yes.
Ms. Conrad.
Yes.
Mr. Paris.
Yes.
Ms. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Zink.
Yes.
Mr. Prera.
Yes.
Mr. Goss.
Yes.
Mr. Epstein.
Aye.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Mr. Beliveau. Mr. Estabrooks.
Aye.
Mr. Theriault.
Yes.
Mr. Glavine.
Yes.
The results of the vote, all members present except for the Speaker voting for the motion.
The motion is carried.
Bill 201, entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses to the Public Service of the Province.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to call the order of business, public bills for third reading.
Public bills for third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to call Bill number 158, the Financial Measures 2007 Act.
Bill
Mr.
number,
Go ahead.
Bill number 158, the Financial Measures Act.
Mr. Speaker, it is my great pleasure and honor to move third reading of the bill.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this morning to speak briefly on the Financial Measures Act and on third reading, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that the government found itself pleasantly surprised, if I can borrow a phrase, from my colleagues with respect to our vote. And I wanted to take the time on the record to address why it was that we have come to this decision. And I think that the people of Nova Scotia would want to know that in our role in holding the government accountable, that we take that job very, very seriously. And I can say with complete confidence that my colleagues here in this caucus found this a very difficult decision to make, Mr. Speaker. We went through the appropriations and we tried to weigh what it was that the government was trying to accomplish against those things that were absent from the appropriations. And we knew that this was our opportunity, if we chose to take it, to vote against the budget and to vote against this bill, to underline the broken commitments that we felt had been made to the people of Nova Scotia. And we could have taken that opportunity to underline, for example, some of the things that we felt were missing in the budget with respect to the very poorest people in our society, some of the things that were absent with respect to the supports that they needed in community services, some of the absences that we felt may be there with respect to education, with respect to health, with respect to seniors and the care that they expect from their government. But we understood always that that would be voting against those things that were not there. And we knew also that this was an opportunity, and some people, likely in the press, and some people in our constituencies who don't find favor with this government would say, this is your opportunity to vote against a government that has a lack of, what they see as a lack of leadership, a lack of direction, that has been erratic with respect to many pieces of legislation that come here, seemingly unable to make a decision and to stick to it. And that opportunity was there as well, Mr. Speaker. So the question is, why then would you vote in favor of it? Well, Mr. Speaker, although it was a difficult decision, it is difficult for a government to spend almost $500 million in new revenue and not do some positive things. And there were things in this budget, there are achievements in the budget that, frankly, we agree with. And there are achievements, more importantly, that we campaigned on. And I would just lay out some of those, Mr. Speaker. They were part of what we saw as the better deal for today's families. And we asked for and we said to the government that we expect that there will be an attempt in this budget to deal with the question of the highest tuition in the country. And the government responded with respect to that. And in fact, students in this province will benefit through lower tuitions as a result of this budget. And that was a commitment that we made and something that we agreed with. We campaigned on the last number of months on a buy local program. And in fact, I met with the Institute of Nova Scotia members. I met with local agricultural groups right around the province. I met with consumers who said that they wanted a buy local program. We laid out what should be in it, and in fact, the exact appropriation that we asked for was in the bill. So voting against the bill meant we would be voting against these things. We asked, of course,
for the removal of the HST off of essentials. And the government brought forward an appropriation that continues to take the HST off of home energy costs, which was something that we included in the basket of essentials. But I notice the provincial portion, as my colleague points out. But I also notice, and I take notice of the fact that very recently the Minister of Finance has agreed that he would look at the other taxes that are levied and to try to determine whether or not there aren't other essentials that ought to be absent that tax. So that was something that we had to consider. Mr. Speaker, we campaigned on and asked for a firefighter's tax credit, and that was in the bill. Mr. Speaker, that was an appropriation was made for that. And there were a host of other things that we asked for or campaigned on, but one of the most important things that we said to the people of Nova Scotia was that the budget must be balanced. And this budget, Mr. Speaker, is balanced, and that was one of the preconditions that we set out for our own support. So it meets that test. And then we looked at that and we tried to balance it against those broken commitments, those commitments that were not there. And we said, you know, Nova Scotians, reasonable Nova Scotians would say, even though commitments are broken, that if the money is not there to do it, then it ought not to be done. That you ought not to spend beyond your ability to pay to support those services. That is a concept, Mr. Speaker, with which we agree, and it was there in the budget. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, is that a very short time ago, the people of Nova Scotia made a decision. In fact, Mr. Speaker, 10 months ago today, they made a decision to have a Conservative government. And a vote against a measure of confidence is a vote to send that question back to the people of Nova Scotia. And we felt that at this point in time, we were not prepared to potentially send back this legislature to the people for another decision, not 10 months after that decision had already been made. And there are people who will say, well, you already knew how the other party was going to vote. But when you decide to use your vote, you must be prepared to be responsible for all of the potential consequences of that vote. And that includes the fact that it could cause an election. So, Mr. Speaker, we were very cognizant of that, and we said we are not going to repudiate the decision of the people of Nova Scotia, the one that they made only 10 months ago. This is the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we'd like to underline, that this was a responsible decision. It was a balanced decision. It took into account how we felt, both emotionally about the way that the government has operated, but more importantly, logically, about what was best for the people of Nova Scotia at this point. I've just spoken about the decision that was made by the people of Nova Scotia. And I think this brings me to the last point that I'm going to make in relation to the decision. And it is this. The people of Cole Harbour Eastern Passage deserve to have a member sitting in this House. And they deserve to have that decision made as soon as possible. And in the same way that we respect the decision of the people that was made 10 months ago, we should respect the right of people to have a representative in the House, and I would call upon the Premier to make that decision without delay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise on Bill 158, the Financial Measures Act. Speaker, as I've said before in this House, following the election of June 2006, our caucus clearly heard the message from Nova Scotia voters. Nova Scotians clearly told us that they wanted us to be more effective as an opposition party and to be able to achieve more results on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, together with the support of my entire caucus and the support of our staff and support of our party, we decided at that point that we were going to prove to Nova Scotians that we were able to be an effective opposition party, being able to provide criticism where criticism was needed, but being able to provide real solutions to the people of this province. Mr. Speaker, immediately after the election, we were faced with a budget vote. And in that budget, we clearly heard the message that the government was listening to what we were saying in the Liberal caucus. The government indicated that it was prepared to establish a department for seniors. The government indicated that it was prepared to put in stricter conflict of interest guidelines for members of cabinet. And then, Mr. Speaker, it was clear to us that it was important to give support to the budget to make minority government work for the people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we used that same attitude when we went into the fall sitting of the legislature. And as a result of the bills that we brought forward, as a result of the issues that we raised on behalf of Nova Scotians, we were able to see 10 Liberal bills pass by this House. Mr. Speaker, I would challenge historians to find a time in Nova Scotia where an opposition party has been able to have 10 bills passed during a sitting of the legislature. It was clear to us at that point in time that we were able to achieve success for Nova Scotians and that we were able to tell Nova Scotians that we were going to make minority government work in their best interests. Mr. Speaker, again, we approached with the same attitude into the spring sitting of the legislature and in the budgetary process. When one looks at the amount of bills that we've tabled, the issues that we've raised on the floor of the House, the press releases, the columns in the papers, it was our efforts to try to make sure that the government understood where our concerns were and what positive solutions we were bringing forward. And Mr. Speaker, when we did get to see the budget document, it was clear to us that the government was listening and the government certainly was indicating a willingness to be able to adopt ideas from our caucus, which I believe are in the best interests of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the budget, we immediately see a doubling of the tax credit for students who graduate from our universities and who remain here in our province. Mr. Speaker, this was a major plank in our election platform last election. While it doesn't go as far as we would like it to go, it is an important step and one which I do hope that the government will be willing to look in the next budget as well for making further enhancements. Anything that we can do as a province to keep our young people, our trained, educated young people here in Nova Scotia is essential, and it's something that we must all strive to do, and I believe this is an important measure to help us in that regard. Mr. Speaker, the efforts by my colleagues from Annapolis, Kings West, and Clare to raise the plight of hog farmers in this province is something they did continuously, both in the House and through the press, to impress upon the government, the Minister of Agriculture, and all of Cabinet the need to be able to provide real support to hog farmers in this province with a direct infusion of cash to help them at this critical time. And Mr. Speaker, the budget does address that issue by providing an additional $500,000 that will be put into the pockets of hog farmers and the families who rely upon that industry to assist them through such a difficult time. Mr. Speaker, we made it clear as a caucus that the plight of rural Nova Scotia was going to be one of our main concerns in this session. The numbers from Statistics Canada clearly show that we have a crisis taking place in communities throughout this entire province with the numbers of residents that are leaving our areas. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that it hits home very hard for me because I have one of the ridings which had the greatest drop in population since the last census. And when I look at my colleagues around me in the House from the Strait area, unfortunately, we have some of the highest figures in the 4 counties of the Strait. So we truly appreciate how important of an issue this is, which is why, Mr. Speaker, our caucus called upon the government to increase funding to the student employment program, to allow our young people who have gone to university to be able to return home and work during the summer months in their home communities, to take an interest in their home communities and to be able to give back. And Mr. Speaker, I know of many people that given that opportunity decided they wanted to return to their home community and have done so. But cuts to that program have had a devastating impact because our young people were going off to university and not returning, not even for the summer months. It was a loss for our communities, and it was a loss for these students. And to see now that additional funding will bring approximately 200 new positions is something certainly that we believe is an important step in that agenda. Mr. Speaker, in the same regard, we are pleased to see that the government has reinstated what was known as the Winter Works Program, a program under the former government that had provided employment in areas of high unemployment during the winter months by helping nonprofit organizations and businesses hire people to assist them during the winter months. Mr. Speaker, reinstating this program will bring over 300 employment opportunities to rural Nova Scotia. That is something that we can all be proud of here in this House. Mr. Speaker, one of the issues which I have raised during my entire time in this House has been the issue of support for caregivers here in this province. The former Liberal government had a program known as the In-Home Support Program, which provided direct financial aid to caregivers. And Mr. Speaker, while I've heard numerous programs from the government and I've heard the recent long-term care strategy by the Leader of the Opposition, none of those programs provided direct financial assistance to caregivers. Mr. Speaker, these are people who leave their employment, stay at home to provide care for a loved one in their home. It saves money to our healthcare system, it saves money to our province, and it provides the compassion and care that Nova Scotians deserve. And Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see that a pilot project has been funded to reinstate this program and to provide caregivers, once again, with direct financial support to assist them and to commend them for the work that they do, for the loved ones that they care for, and the amount of money that they save our province and that they assist our communities as well. Mr. Speaker, our caucus as well introduced legislation on numerous occasions calling upon the government to reduce the freedom of information protection of privacy fees. It's an issue that I have raised numerous times here in this House, and we are pleased to see that through the Financial Measures Act, the government has adopted the O'Brien report. We are hoping that the government will look at further changes as we move forward, but this is an important step and a recognition by the government that these fees were too high, and certainly, hopefully, we will once again work towards allowing Nova Scotians access to the information that they want here in this province. Mr. Speaker, while the government has talked about the success that it has had through economic development and through the payroll rebate program, this was a program that was, for the most part, unavailable to rural Nova Scotia businesses. We know that rural Nova Scotia and Nova Scotia itself, the backbone is in small business. Most small businesses do not have 50 employees. That requirement made it that rural Nova Scotia businesses, for the most part, could not access this. We are pleased to see that the government and the department has moved towards reducing the requirement to 25, and we do hope to see that number reduced again into the future. Mr. Speaker, our caucus spoke about the concerns of students, and we are pleased to see that the government is continued in its commitment to reduce tuition here in this province. Mr. Speaker, we simply cannot continue to have the tuition rates we have here in Nova Scotia. More and more of our students are going to other universities outside of our jurisdiction, which is a loss to all of us. Mr. Speaker, university has become unaffordable for many Nova Scotian families, and that is something which we simply cannot allow to continue, and we hope that the government will look towards more initiatives to bring tuition in this province, not only in line with other jurisdictions, but even strive to have even lower tuition rates here in this province. And Mr. Speaker, the change in the primary age brings us in line with most other Canadian jurisdictions, and I want to commend the member from Kings West and my colleague from Halifax Clayton Park, who both have proposed this in the past. And finally, Mr. Speaker, our caucus has talked about the need to have a standalone department for seniors in this province. Seniors continue to make up a major component of our population and play a major role in our province. We are pleased to see that the government has established a standalone department for seniors and provided additional funding for that department, and we look forward to its continued implementation in the months and years ahead. Mr. Speaker, this session our caucus introduced 29 pieces of legislation. Legislation that was meant to deal with a whole host of issues facing Nova Scotians. My colleague from Clare introduced legislation to talk about safety in crosswalks. There's no better time to deal with that issue but recognizing the deaths that have occurred recently and the statistics which show we need to do more. My colleague from Digby Annapolis brought forward the issue of the HST being charged on funerals and the impact this has had on families, and we're pleased to see that the government has indicated that this is a concern and the possibility of working towards a solution in the future. Mr. Speaker, we have introduced numerous pieces of legislation dealing with the environment, dealing with rural Nova Scotians, and dealing with the issues facing our province. We heard the message from Nova Scotia voters in June of 2006. They sent another minority government here to this province. They did elect more Conservative members than any other party, and we respected that. We committed to be a more responsible party. We committed to be a more responsible caucus. I believe that we have been effective in our criticism and at the same time have proposed positive solutions which are clearly reflected not only in the budget but in the bill that was passed this session as well, assuring that any increase in user fees will come before the House of Assembly. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians benefit when this legislature can work together in their best interest, and I believe it has in this session, and that is why we're proud not only to give our support for the budget, but to indicate last week we would be supporting the budget and send a clear message to Nova Scotians that minority government can work when the parties work together in this House for the best interests of Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance. We close debate. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to thank the Leader of the Opposition and the Leader of the Liberal Party for their comments with respect to the Financial Measures Act. Mr. Speaker, I know, having been in opposition myself, how difficult the decisions are to make with respect to the supporting of a government's budget. And I would like to congratulate both the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party on their responsible decisions in supporting our budget. I know that decision did not come easily, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that whether or not we were disappointed with the outcome of last year's election, we are all required as participants in the democratic process to respect the wishes of Nova Scotians expressed at the ballot box. And that is what I think I take away